Welcome back to Beyond the Plot, where unforgettable stories are brought to life through immersive narration.
You are about to step into a world where the thin veneer of civilization has completely deteriorated.
Yeah, imagine being ordered to travel deep into a primordial, untamed jungle. Your mission isn't to capture an enemy combatant.
Right, you're hunting down one of your own.
Exactly. A highly decorated military leader who has just severed all ties to his command, abandoned the rules of the civilized world, and established himself as a god over this brutal, isolated kingdom.
We are going to take you down a river where the laws of society they gradually cease to exist.
And we should warn you, this deep dive is not a standard military breakdown. It's really a psychological descent.
Yeah, we're exploring what happens when the human mind is stripped of its comforting illusions and left alone with the terrifying purity of madness.
To understand the sheer gravity of this descent, you really have to first immerse yourself in the environment where this story begins.
I mean, picture an ancient, misty swamp in the early hours of dawn. There's this pale blue, bruised light filtering through a canopy that looks like it hasn't changed in a million years.
It's totally prehistoric.
Right. The water is tepid, foul, just thick with mud. And slowly, without a single sound, a form emerges from the murky depths.
And it's not an animal. It's a soldier.
Exactly. His eyes breach the surface, scanning the tree line with this predatory stillness. His helmet bears a morbid, hand-painted slogan.
And below the waterline, he's not even wearing a standard-issue uniform, right?
No, his body is covered in primitive, bizarre camouflage paint. He's heavily adorned with bandoliers of high-caliber ammunition. He has become entirely integrated into the swamp.
I want to pause on that image for a second because the atmosphere you're describing carries this immense sense of prehistoric dread.
It really does.
If you look closer into this mist, the landscape is crawling with men who have completely abandoned uniformity for savagery. I mean, they're wearing feathers, animal parts, primitive ornamentation.
Yeah, some have their heads completely shaved, others have wild, matted hair.
Right. And yet, they are holding modern automatic weapons. They move with the silent grace of indigenous hunters.
But when the violence erupts, it is an absolute sensory overload.
It's catastrophic.
A shotgun blast shatters the silence, and it's immediately followed by an overwhelming barrage of automatic fire. You are witnessing men being torn apart, impaled on spears, and then incinerated by blinding bursts of flame from a flamethrower.
And over this horrific slaughter, there's the deafening electric sound of modern rock music drowning out the screams.
It's so jarring. The clash of the ancient jungle and mechanized warfare creates an environment that feels fundamentally corrupted.
But right as you, the listener, are consumed by the terror of this violence, the narrative violently pulls us away. The perspective shifts across the globe.
Yeah, zeroing in on a marina in California.
The transition is incredibly jarring. You are no longer in the mud and the blood. You are on the polished teak deck of a luxury cabin cruiser in the late afternoon sun.
Guests are lounging in bathing suits, sipping expensive cocktails, snapping photographs.
And at the center of this gathering is a wealthy corporate executive. His skin is glistening with suntan oil, and he is casually holding court.
But he's not discussing survival or combat. He's talking about the global price of sugar and oil reserves.
It's a chillingly casual conversation. He draws circles on a newspaper illustrating international economies to his guests.
Before making a deeply unsettling admission, he states, quite plainly, that he didn't build a $2 billion empire by sitting idle.
He openly declares that the immense military power of his nation exists fundamentally to protect his corporate interests abroad.
Let me jump in here because this is where the cognitive dissonance becomes almost unbearable. How does a human mind process this reality?
On one side of the world, men are slaughtering each other in a primordial swamp. On the other side, the architects of that conflict treat the violence as a mere line item on a ledger.
Right. And this contrast is our introduction to the internal reality of Captain Benjamin Willard. Willard is a man caught in the psychological crossfire of these two worlds.
That's the perfect way to frame it. Willard is technically present on the periphery of this wealthy gathering, but mentally, he is completely isolated.
Through his internal monologue, you really begin to understand the sheer depth of his alienation. This is a man who carries an empty machine pistol in an attaché case. He sleeps with it.
I have to ask you about that detail. Why would a trained soldier carry an empty submachine gun instead of a standard military-issue rifle? To a civilian, that makes no sense.
It makes no sense until you understand the breakdown of trust. Willard carries that empty weapon because he no longer trusts the equipment issued by the military apparatus.
I've seen it fail.
Exactly. He has watched Those standard issue weapons fail disastrously in the field. He has watched men die because a rifle jammed at the critical moment.
So when he looks at the corporate executives,
Yeah.
he cynically wonders how much profit the defense contractors made off that faulty equipment.
He prefers an empty gun that he understands over a loaded one provided by a system that views his life as expendable.
So his psyche is already fracturing before the mission even begins. He is fundamentally broken.
Yeah, unable to reintegrate into a society that has no concept of what he has endured. He recalls surviving in unimaginable conditions.
Like drinking contaminated water straight from rice paddies, chewing on bamboo shoots for days, operating far beyond the lines of authorized combat.
When he sees the people around him casually wasting resources, his resentment borders on homicidal.
The disconnect between the visceral horror of the front lines and the sanitized view of the conflict back home is the first major fracture in Willard's reality.
He has physically returned to civilization, but psychologically his mind is still trapped in the jungle.
Which makes Willard the perfect instrument for the covert operation he is about to be handed. He is summoned to a highly classified briefing in Saigon.
And given an assignment that officially does not exist.
Right. He is ordered to take a small patrol boat upriver, crossing deep into unauthorized territory, to locate a rogue commanding officer named Colonel Walter E. Kurtz.
Kurtz was once a brilliant, highly decorated military asset. But he has gone completely off the grid.
He is now operating with extreme, unsanctioned brutality, commanding his own private army of indigenous fighters. Willard's orders are unequivocal.
Find the colonel, infiltrate his command, and eliminate him. Terminate with extreme prejudice.
To execute this mission, Willard has to rely on a small Navy River patrol boat and its crew.
And it is vital for us to understand the psychological makeup of these men, because their unraveling directly mirrors the collapse of the world around them.
Let's talk about the chief. He's this tense, seasoned sailor whose entire focus is on the mechanical reality of keeping the boat moving.
He is the anchor to military protocol. Then you have the chef. Here is a man from New Orleans who was studying to be a saucier.
He was destined for the culinary world of Paris, only to be drafted into a war zone.
Right. His breaking point occurred in military cook school, repulsed by the sight of boiling gray meat meant for the troops. He is an artist forced into a slaughterhouse.
Alongside him is Lance, a young, detached professional surfer.
Lance's coping mechanism is complete dissociation. His mind is constantly drifting away from the reality of the war, chasing the memory of waves and sunshine.
And finally, there is Clean, a highly alert, jittery young man who is perpetually on edge, representing the raw, terrified youth fed into the conflict.
They're ordinary men thrust into an extraordinary nightmare, completely unaware of the true, dark nature of their passenger's assignment.
Their journey begins by intersecting with one of the most surreal and disturbing displays of military authority you can possibly imagine.
They arrive at a chaotic coastal assault zone to secure safe passage into the river's mouth. Here, they encounter Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore.
And this commander treats a horrific, blood-soaked combat zone with the casual enthusiasm of a man hosting a beach party.
It's a staggering scene. Mortars are falling around them. Men are actively fighting, bleeding, and dying in the sand.
And yet, this commander is completely unfazed. He strolls through the carnage with a terrifying level of comfort.
But his motivations represent a complete systemic failure of rational authority.
Wait, let's unpack how broken this authority is. He discovers that Lance, the young crewman on Willard's boat, is a famous surfer.
Instantly, the commander's priorities shift. He abandons tactical military objectives.
His sole focus becomes securing a specific patch of enemy-held coastline purely so he and his men can surf the waves.
He orders a devastating large-scale incendiary bombing strike on the adjacent tree line.
And to be clear, this is not to flesh out enemy combatants for a strategic battlefield advantage.
No, it is to silence the incoming fire so that the waves can be ridden without interruption. He is utilizing the most horrific weapons of modern warfare to facilitate a leisure activity.
The execution of this strike is a vision of apocalyptic madness.
Phantoms scream overhead, unleashing rockets, high explosives, and a massive payload of chemical fire. The jungle erupts into a hellscape.
Blinding flames and choking black smoke. And as the devastation settles, the commander stands amidst the chemical fallout and delivers this nostalgic reflection on the destruction.
He speaks wistfully about the distinct odor of the chemical accelerant left behind in the morning after a prolonged bombardment.
He doesn't smell death. He doesn't smell tragedy. He associates the scent of total atmospheric annihilation with victory.
I want to challenge the listener to really think about the implications of this. How does the military chain of command even process an order like that?
They don't. The expert oversight has completely vanished. The commander is undeniably effective at orchestrating destruction, but his application of violence is entirely untethered from sanity.
When the massive chemical fire unexpectedly alters the wind patterns, ruining the waves for surfing, he reacts with genuine childish disappointment.
He is completely oblivious to the massacre he has just orchestrated.
This is the critical realization Willard has at the beach. Military authority here hasn't just failed, it has become violently absurd.
Recognizing the sheer lunacy of this situation, Willard and his crew realize they are in as much danger from their own commanders as they are from the enemy.
They decide they have to flee immediately. In a moment of defiant absurdity, Willard and Lance actually steal the commander's prized custom surfboard.
Under the threat of incoming mortar fire, they sprint toward the water, clutching the stolen board, and scramble onto their patrol boat.
As they speed away from the coastline, zigzagging to avoid fire, they are escaping not just the enemy, but the chaotic madness of their own military.
They have left the last outpost of recognized authority behind. From this point forward, the river will guide them into a fundamentally different kind of terror.
As the boat pushes deeper into the dense, overhanging canopy of the river, the atmosphere shifts. It grows heavy, claustrophobic, and deeply unsettling.
The war of helicopters and napalm fades, and the ancient jungle begins to assert its dominance over the men.
This shift is perfectly illustrated when Willard and Chef are forced to leave the relative safety of the boat to search for food in the dense brush.
They step off the vessel and are immediately swallowed by the suffocating darkness of the ancient forest.
They move cautiously through the thick elephant grass. They revert to primal stalking techniques, using hand gestures and mimicking cricket sounds.
The tension is absolute. You can feel the weight of the darkness pressing in on them.
They are anticipating an ambush by enemy soldiers. They are mentally prepared for a human conflict.
But instead, the jungle itself attacks.
With a sudden rushing sound and a terrifying roar, a massive tiger leaps from the darkness.
The men are completely overwhelmed. They fire their weapons blindly into the brush, not with the precision of trained soldiers, but with the panicked desperation of prey.
Chef's reaction here is pivotal. He breaks completely. He turns and sprints blindly through the dense foliage, driven by pure, hysterical terror.
When he finally reaches the boat, he is a shattered man. He dives headfirst into the vessel, screaming and weeping, crying out that he will never leave the boat again.
Willard watches Chef's psychological deterioration and comes to a grim realization. You cannot step into this environment unless you are prepared to surrender entirely to it.
The rules of engagement, the training, the technology, none of it applies here.
The environment is actively hostile and entirely indifferent to their uniforms.
As the physical danger increases, so does Willard's psychological obsession with his target.
The boat moves further upriver, and the crew tries to cope with the mounting stress in increasingly bizarre ways.
You have this incredibly surreal contrast. Lance is water skiing behind the patrol boat while loud rock music blares from a radio, trying to recreate the California coast in a war zone.
Meanwhile, Willard sits in total, suffocating isolation, obsessively reviewing Colonel Kurtz's classified dossier.
He is trying to solve a psychological puzzle. How does a model officer, a man with a brilliant tactical mind and a trajectory straight to the highest levels of the Pentagon, transform into a rogue warlord?
The contrast within the documents Willard reads is chilling. Let's look at those documents because they represent the collapse of a mind.
First, Willard reads a standard, agonizingly normal letter from the colonel's wife.
She writes about the mundane struggles of raising children back home. She expresses her desperate lack of information from the military and her profound longing for her husband to return.
It is a voice of pure, civilized domesticity.
But immediately following this, Willard examines the very last piece of correspondence the colonel sent. Stamped top secret, it is a message scrawled in a savage, chaotic hand.
It offers absolutely no comfort. It simply orders his family to sell their home, sell their car, find someone else, and forget him entirely.
He states with absolute finality that he is never coming back.
I like to think of this river as a kind of psychological time machine. The further upriver this small boat travels, the more the layers of societal conditioning and military protocol are stripped away.
The man described in the early pages of that file, the decorated officer who lived in a suburban home, no longer exists.
Exactly. The jungle has fundamentally altered him. Willard begins to realize that he's not hunting a soldier who went AWOL.
He is hunting a man who has evolved, or perhaps devolved into something else entirely. a force of nature that operates outside the bounds of human morality.
This complete collapse of civilization becomes physically manifest when the boat arrives at a forward evacuation center further up the river at the Dulong Bridge.
It is deep into the night, and it is pouring rain. It is a bleak, disorganized nightmare of a camp that is quite literally sinking into the mud.
The atmosphere is apocalyptic. Willard neps off the boat seeking vital information and a commanding officer to report to.
Instead, he finds utter chaos. Soldiers are wandering aimlessly in the torrential downpour, completely unmoored.
When Willard forcefully asks a passing soldier who is in charge, the man just smiles idiotically.
He babbles incoherently, makes animal noises, and stumbles away into the dark. There is no authority left. The chain of command has completely dissolved.
In the midst of this muddy purgatory, Willard steps into a damp, dimly lit tent and encounters a situation of profound absurdity.
He finds a stranded civilian agent acting as a handler for 3 magazine models. They had been brought in via helicopter to entertain the troops, only to be abandoned when the situation deteriorated.
The handler is desperate. He realizes that Willard's boat represents the only functional piece of machinery left, the only way out of the collapsing outpost.
Without hesitation, the civilian attempts to barter the women's company in exchange for the patrol boat's vital fuel supply.
It is a grotesque proposition, reducing human intimacy and survival to a desperate, muddy transaction.
Willard's reaction here is fascinating. He reacts with utter revulsion. He violently refuses the trade, citing his obligation to his men, his military pride, and the concept of esprit de corps.
He insists that war creates a sacred bond between soldiers that he will not compromise for such a degraded exchange.
But we have to look at the profound irony of Willard's stance here. He is clinging to high-minded concepts like military honor, unity, and discipline in an environment where human life has lost all intrinsic value.
He is trying to enforce the rules of a civilized structure that is actively rotting away around him.
The handler mocks his pride, fully aware that out here in the mud and the rain, concepts like honor are entirely meaningless currencies.
It's like trying to use a credit card in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. The transaction fails, but the encounter leaves a heavy, lingering sense of disgust.
Civilization has not just retreated from this outpost. It has been corrupted beyond recognition. The river beyond this bridge represents the final severing of all ties to the known world.
As the boat leaves the chaotic outpost and pushes into the final, darkest stretch of the river, the atmosphere shifts from chaotic to somber and deeply ominous.
The physical toll becomes devastating. The crew's numbers begin to dwindle, claimed by the sudden, unseen violence of the riverbanks.
The survivors are exhausted, hollowed out by fear, grief, and the relentless, crushing pressure of their surroundings.
Finally, the river ends. They arrive at the colonel's compound.
And the visual reality of this place is far worse than anything Willard could have anticipated from the dossier.
As they approach, the dense jungle seems to part, revealing a horrifying architecture of violence. The compound is built among ancient stone ruins, but it has been heavily, brutally fortified.
The walls are not just lined with sandbags. They are adorned with human skulls.
Stakes are driven into the muddy earth, bearing freshly severed heads. Barbed wire is strung with human remains.
And moving silently through the dense, heavy mist are heavily armed, wildly painted native warriors.
They carry a mix of primitive clubs and modern assault rifles, watching the arrival of the small boat with an absolute, unsettling stillness.
But I think the most disturbing element of this tribal society is not the indigenous warriors.
It is the presence of former elite American soldiers who have completely assimilated into the colonel's kingdom.
They stand among the native fighters, their faces painted in bizarre camouflage, wearing little more than loincloths.
They move with the same primitive grace, staring blankly with hollow, haunted eyes.
These are the remnants of the very military structure Willard represents, now completely absorbed into a new, savage order.
There is a powerful visual juxtaposition here. A downed modern helicopter has been turned into a sandbagged machine gun nest, surrounded by chanting warriors.
It symbolizes the total conquest of modern technology and institutional power by primal, ancient instinct.
Amidst this silent, heavily armed multitude, Willard encounters a frantic, manic figure. He is a civilian photojournalist, a deserter who has become a deeply indoctrinated disciple of the colonel.
The man's energy is a sharp, jarring contrast to the quiet menace of the compound. He chatters endlessly, wide-eyed and erratic.
He speaks about the Colonel's mind in cosmic philosophical terms. He claims the Colonel has expanded his consciousness, that he understands the profound depths of love and violence alike.
The disciple dismisses the horrific sights around them, the severed heads, the crucified machinery, as mere byproducts of a genius operating on a higher plane of existence.
He is trying to rationalize pure savagery through poetry.
This manic disciple serves as the herald for the Colonel himself. When Willard is finally captured and brought into the dark, austere stone cavern that serves as the Colonel's headquarters, the physical reality of the man is striking.
The Colonel is physically unwell, suffering in the sweltering heat, yet he projects an overwhelming hypnotic intelligence.
The space around him is a graveyard of modern military strategy. Tactical maps and charts have fallen into decay, replaced by native charms to ward off spirits.
The stone walls are covered in philosophical graffiti. Most notably, there is a chilling declaration painted on the stone: everything is permitted.
It is a complete rejection of all moral frameworks.
The tension in this cavern is suffocating. Willard stands before the man he has spent weeks obsessively studying.
The Colonel questions Willard's motives for traveling so far upriver. The Colonel knows precisely why Willard is there, but he forces him to confront the reality of his own nature.
In a moment of chilling stillness, Willard abandons the pretense of a standard military operation and admits his true function.
He acknowledges that he is an assassin sent by the intelligence agencies to terminate the Colonel's command.
What follows is a demonstration of absolute, terrifying power. To illustrate his complete liberation from moral restraint, the Colonel reaches down, picks up a weapon, and without a single change in expression, he abruptly executes a man standing nearby.
He then casually tosses the weapon aside. Willard, a hardened killer who has witnessed the worst atrocities of the war, is visibly stunned.
The Colonel asks him again if he truly understands the forces at play in this jungle. This sudden act of violence is not meant to intimidate Willard.
It is an ideological statement. The Colonel begins to articulate his philosophy of total war.
He speaks with deep, complex admiration for the enemy's pure, instinctual brutality. He recounts a time when his Special Forces unit inoculated children in a village against polio.
When the enemy forces returned, they severed the inoculated arms of every child, leaving them in a pile.
Simply to demonstrate their absolute commitment to victory and their rejection of Western aid.
The Colonel realized in that moment that these enemy fighters were not monsters.
They were disciplined men who possessed the profound strength to commit horrific acts without feeling, without the burden of morality, without judgment.
They were entirely committed to the destruction of their enemy.
The Colonel despises the hypocritical, half-hearted methods of his own military. He views the military brass in Washington as weak.
Constrained by a desperate need to maintain the illusion of civilized morality while simultaneously dropping chemical fire on innocent villages.
To the Colonel, true clarity in war requires shedding those hypocrisies. It requires embracing complete, unfiltered savagery.
He demands that Willard recognize the terrible beauty in absolute apocalyptic war, a war where mercy is a fatal weakness.
Because victory is the only metric that matters. He argues that until the military is willing to be as ruthless and unfeeling as the enemy, they are merely sending young men to die for a lie.
This is the philosophical core of his madness. He believes that to win a war of annihilation, you must annihilate your own humanity first.
Any lingering moral restraint is just a vulnerability the enemy will exploit.
As we transition into the analysis of this journey, we really have to look at the massive contrast between the two extreme representations of authority Willard encounters.
Consider Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore on the beach back at the beginning of the river. Here is a man who utilizes the most devastating, horrific weapons of modern warfare for trivial personal entertainment.
He bombs a tree line so his men can surf. Then look at the rogue colonel at the end of the river.
He utilizes horrific, brutal violence, severed heads, and executions, but he does so with an intense, terrifying ideological purity.
He uses violence not for amusement, but as a total commitment to the nature of war itself.
The crucial question you have to ask yourself is, which of these two men is truly mad?
The military command officially deemed the rogue colonel insane and ordered his assassination.
Yet that exact same military structure fully supported, supplied, and promoted the commander on the beach who treated a massacre like a vacation.
The absurdity of this contradiction is not lost on Willard. As he traveled up the river and watched the moral boundaries of his world collapse, he began to deeply understand his target's perspective.
Willard recognized that the military's rules of engagement were a comforting fiction. A lie told to make the slaughter palatable to the politicians and the public back home.
Willard's increasing identification with the colonel is the true psychological tragedy of the mission. By the time he reaches the compound and is faced with completing his mission, he has shed the illusions he clung to earlier.
He no longer cares about military pride or esprit de corps. He recognizes that out here, in the deep, primeval dark, those concepts are meaningless.
He understands exactly why the colonel stripped away all external limits. When you are surrounded by absolute brutality, playing by civilized rules is a death sentence.
This brings us to a terrifying, provocative thought regarding the colonel's ultimate state of mind. Is the colonel actually insane?
Or has his immersion in this unfiltered environment forced him into a state of terrifying hyperlucidity?
Perhaps he is the only one who clearly sees the true nature of power. The men in the clean, air-conditioned rooms drawing circles on maps, the wealthy executives on yachts profiting from the conflict, they are insulated by the comforting illusions of civilization.
The colonel has shattered those illusions. He has looked directly into the abyss of human nature and embraced the horror of what it takes to wield absolute power without consequence.
Ultimately, Willard fulfills his grim purpose. The assassination is not carried out like a clean military strike, but as a primal, ritualistic slaughter, mirroring the ancient environment that has consumed them both.
Willard strikes the colonel down in the dark, severing him from a world he had long since abandoned.
And as the colonel dies, he whispers his final realization of the abyss he stared into for so long. The horror. The horror.
It is a warning, an acknowledgement of the ultimate darkness at the core of the human soul when all restraints are removed.
And as Willard leaves the compound, walking through the parted sea of native warriors who now view him as their new god, we are left wondering, did Willard complete his mission, or did he simply become the next vessel for that same darkness?
That realization is the core of this entire narrative. This is not merely a breakdown of a military operation gone wrong. It is a chilling exploration of what happens to the human soul when all external consequences, all laws, and all societal pressures are completely removed. You've been listening to Beyond the Plot. If you enjoyed this journey, leave a like and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. Until next time, go beyond the plot.